Good afternoon. Yes. Before we start, why don't we start with a small trivia question, just so that I can see how many of you all are awake, especially the ones at the back. Um, so let's say over the last 1 month, and I just want a show of hands on this. How many of you all went outside? Let's say you left home, you left office, wherever, without your physical wallet, right? But you had no problem whatsoever of any kind in terms of transacting anywhere. Show of hands. Yeah, you left without your wallet, but you had no problem whatsoever in transacting. Yeah, that's a good number. That's a good number, right? I would say roughly 60-70% of you put your hands up. Just think about this. Like, this scenario was unimaginable even like 6-7 years back, right? Like, you would never have thought that you'll come to a place where your phone just acts like your wallet, right? You don't need anything else, right? But that's the situation that we are in today, which is something to be immensely proud of, right? And so on that note, right, like, so this brings to me the topic for today, like, and I'm going to talk about tech trends that are really shaping the future of digital payments in our country today. I always tell my audiences that in any session, right, if you all feel that you've just learned 3 new things, just 3, right, then the session has had some value, right? And I really hope and believe that we would be able to do that in today's session, right? So just a little bit about myself. Okay, yeah. So post my graduation, I did my engineering and then my MBA. Followed that up with the CFA. I spent more than 18 years in the industry, right? Largely in the fintech space, and even within that, largely in the payment space. So I currently lead merchant payments at Amazon Pay. Prior to that, I was head of strategy and ops at PayPal. I co-founded Zeta, one of India's largest expense and meal voucher payment solutions company, which got sold to Sodexo. I've been a director on the board of 5 companies. I've also been part of a $700 million VC fund. I actively engage with IMA, IM Code, as part of their incubators. I'm also serve as a fintech mentor to a lot of startups. So I like meeting and interacting a lot of people like you, right? I can see a lot of, I would suppose, budding entrepreneurs in this in this room. So that's a little bit about myself. What we will do today, can everyone hear me clearly? Yeah, great. So what we'll do today, we'll look at some of the factors driving digitization in our country, right? Like, so all of us are rather an integral part of this. So what is really going on, on the macro side? We'll come to digital payments and how that has really mushroomed. Within that, we'll look at merchant payments, right? Like payments that you make to merchants whenever you step out, etc. And post that, we'll look at what are some of the recent innovations, what are things that are at the leading edge of tech, right? What are things that intrigue us? What are things that 5 years later, are things that we can predict even right away, right? So this is kind of how I've kind of organized the whole thing. So there are very clear tailwinds driving digitization, right? And in some way, I think we are blessed to be in a country where a lot of things are coming together in an amazing way, right? Like, whether it is the kind of population demographies or, the kind of very inexpensive data access, the kind of penetration of smartphones, whether it is in terms of, the access to mobile, access to kind of credit, etc., that's currently playing out through our systems, which I'll talk about, right, in terms of how we have created some of these identity layers, right, like Aadhaar, etc. We've literally leapfrogged a lot of other countries in terms of the time that they took, right? So it's a beautiful confluence of things coming together in an amazing way, and we are happy to be at this juncture in this place, right? In some sense, people say that India, I think, is at a growth trajectory which is unstoppable. And that's come because of a confluence of many factors, some of which I've laid out here, right? So as one of the key things, what we call as the JAM. What is JAM? What is JAM? Okay, Jandan, Aadhaar, Mobile, right? So how is that trinity helped? Jandan is where more than 500 million people have got bank accounts. Aadhaar, all of you are familiar with in terms of what it has done for KYC, etc. Mobile, all of you are aware. I think we are touching close to 400, 500 million smartphones in the country today, right? So all that has caused this digitization to happen at a tremendous pace. Moving forward, and I've tried to lay out, I told you a lot of structural things came together, right? So what has really happened over the last 10 years that has fast-tracked this, right? Like, so if you look at it, right from the time Aadhaar came about, right from the time UPI came about, and we'll talk about UPI, right from the time that, you started having eKYCs and stuff, right? Like, so if you look at it, a lot of things have happened, right? And in some sense, you will see that demonetization, right, when it happened, in some sense, it was a blessing in disguise. The pandemic for digitization was a blessing in disguise, right? Like, so a lot of us wanted to do only contactless payments, right? And that further fast-tracked the, how digital payments started being used. Like, I think there was a statistic that a lot of people started getting into digital payments because, the epidemic kind of made them want to do that, right? Like, so all these things have kind of come together. And in terms of what has been the backbone of this, right? Like, and this is something which we can be very proud of in terms of what we have built, right? This is what is called as the India stack, right? And we should know, like, if today we are talking of UPI, we are talking of digital payments, we are talking of KYC, like if you go to an airport, if you're talking of Digiyatra, etc. All this digitization, what has it happened on the backbone of, right? And that tech infrastructure is super critical. It's super critical, because that tech infrastructure is what makes all this happen, right? So if you look at it, there is the payments layer, there is a data layer, there is the identity layer, right, which is sitting at the forefront, which is enabling all of us to all of this to happen. So identity, again, very clear. Who are you? How do I identify you? Payments layer. How do I allow anyone to pay anyone in a low-cost, frictionless manner, almost instant? Data layer. How do I take consent and share information so that you can receive what you want, right? So, starting with the digital identity, again, Aadhaar was probably one of the breakthrough innovations that happened for this country, over the last so many years. But that laid the foundation of, how people could be identified and verified, right? So moving to payments, So what are the key factors that have actually revolutionized payments, right? And if you look at the data there, today Indian payments is almost a $3 trillion industry, okay? And that's going to go to $10 trillion in just like 3 years. That's the kind of pace at which it's going. So what does it mean? So if today, across the country, the statistic is that 2 out of every 5 payments happen digitally. 2 out of every 5. That's going to change to 2 out of every 3. Out of every 3 payments, 2 payments are going to happen digitally by 2026. Right? That's the power and that's the pace at which digital payments are expanding. Okay? Now, why did this happen? How did this happen? So we saw the first thing, which we said that the rapid expansion of digital infrastructure. I showed you why the infrastructure is super key. Okay? Next is in terms of the UPI adoption, right? Like, so UPI as a concept came to be in a manner which was zero or low cost at a systemic level, instant payments, frictionless infrastructure, which could allow anyone to pay anyone at any point of time, right? Next is in terms of contactless, which we spoke about, why customer preferences came to move to becoming contactless. Then in terms of increased merchant acceptance of digital payments, and we will see some numbers there where merchants, right, like today you go and shop, back to my question when I started, like how many of you could go and shop without having your physical wallet? Like, because merchants have started accepting this in a large manner. And a lot of tech disruptions and enablements that have happened by big tech and fintech, like big tech being the fangs of the world, right? And fintechs, again, like we have a very thriving fintech ecosystem in the country, right? And some of these tech expos are like a hotbed for such fintechs to come together to look at innovation, to kind of discuss, how we can make this much better, right? And possibly like, Kozhikode can become a hotbed of, for fintech, as we progress. I think that we have kind of laid the founding stone with this event, but it can really grow much bigger over a period of time, right? So just in terms of numbers, and numbers talk a lot, right? In terms of the sheer dominance which UPI is seeing, you will see that like in just a matter of 7 years, UPI will go from close to 16% to almost 73% of the total digital transactions, right? So UPI is here to stay. And how many of you know that today a lot of countries abroad are asking us, are seeking help from us in terms of how to implement UPI in their countries, right? There are n number of countries that we are now exporting UPI to, right? Because as an infrastructure, it is truly enviable. It's truly enviable, right? And again, think about it, folks. Today, if you go to US, right, you land in the US, you don't have a zero-cost instant payment mechanism. Really. You go to the US, you can't. You can't get instant payment at zero cost. There is no system there, right? You either have to wait for a day for a low-cost system, or if you want it instant, you pay a very high amount, right? But this system is there, this infrastructure is there in our country, which is something that we can really be proud of, and that is something that all of us are so familiar with now, right? So it's truly something remarkable, come to think of it. So just some statistics, right? Like and you can see the graphs in terms of how UPI is clearly leapfrogged traditional instruments like credit cards, which have been around for many decades, isn't it? Like, so you look at the numbers, you will see that today, in a month, the total value of UPI payments in the country is 10 lakh crores. 10 lakh crores. That's a number, right? And that's the pace at which these instruments and this growth is happening today, right? So I just kind of wanted to put that out so that you can see how fast we are actually moving forward in this direction. And things that we are familiar with, right? You go to any roadside outlet, you go to a kirana, you see what is ubiquitous are QR codes, right? QR codes are ubiquitous. Interoperability is very much there. So it doesn't matter which QR you scan, etc. QR codes are ubiquitous, right? In fact, a lot of places you don't go to a QR code. A QR code comes to you, right? As seen by the second image, right? A QR code comes to you, where you can just pay. Like you sit in your car, you order for a chai or samosa, and then the guy comes and says, "Sir, please scan." That's it. You're done. Like nowhere in the world, folks, this exists, right? So, again, I just thought I'll just reinforce that point. Just again, in terms of numbers, by 2026, we have more than 40 million merchants who will receive more than $2 trillion of offline payments only through UPI, right? And I think all of you know, but UPI is zero cost to the merchant, right? It's zero cost to the merchant. So think about it. Like a merchant who typically, let's say and we can talk of all types of merchants, right? Let's talk about, let's say, a supermarket down the road, okay? What is the typical, let's say before UPI arrived, what were his modes of receiving payment? So a supermarket down the road, before UPI arrived, what were his modes of receiving payment? Cash, then? Sorry? POS device, yes? Yeah? So do you know that in a POS device, every time a card is swiped, he incurs a cost? Every time, right? And the cost, of course, varies, but there is for sure a cost which he incurs. So imagine that, a significant chunk of that, if he moves that to UPI, he's saving that cost, right? He's saving that cost, and that directly goes to his bottom line, right? Now you move this same thought process from a supermarket to like an even smaller shop, like even an individual vendor, then those savings start adding up, right? Those savings start adding up, and that's really something which is phenomenal, which is panned out, okay? Again, in terms of, so what we did, we covered why this whole digitization happened in our country, okay? We looked at, what are some of the things, driving digital payments, right? So digitization as a country from a macro point of view, how is digital payments kind of panning out? Within that, how are offline payments, which is, payments that you do in terms of transacting at a merchant, right? How are they panning out? Then we will come to a few innovations, right? And And I'll talk through each one of those innovations in a brief manner, and if you all have further questions, we can, of course, spend time during the Q&A. But I'm going to talk of 5, 6 innovations which, seeing it, some of it might, would really strike a chord because, again, you would have either heard of it or used it yourself, etc. Okay? So the first thing is voice-activated payments, right? So voice as a lever has been significant, right, over the last few years. Right? The reason why Alexa or or a Google Home, why those voice assistants have been such a big success, right, is because innately, right, we want multiple form factors. We don't want to type all the time, right? You want to talk, right? And conversation is something which naturally comes to us, right? So, and because of the advancements in voice technology, you could extend conversation to conversational commerce, right? You could extend conversation to payments happening via conversations. So it could be something like, hey Alexa, pay my electricity bill for this month, right? And then it takes it from your wallet, and then it's done. It's invisible. It happens at the back end, right? Or it could be something like pay this person, right? Today you have 123 pay in UPI, right, which allows you to just call, tell the phone number of the person to whom you want to transfer it to, and then the payment is done. Okay? And please understand, these are especially important, for people, let's say, with disabilities, right? Who might not be able to type, but voice is something that they might be it would be very easy for them, right? So those are things, that are happening. Even retail purchases, right? Like, you can order, like, for example, on Amazon today, has Alexa embedded, where you can order, add it to your shopping cart and check out without having to press a button, right? So these things will increasingly become a part of what we do, okay? So today, yes, you might be opening the UPI app, you might be selecting the person whom you're sending the amount to, entering the PIN, etc., etc. But like tomorrow, you might not even need to do that, right? Because your voice is unique to you, right? So all it needs is authentication, and your voice is unique to you. And with that authentication, you should be able to send funds to anybody, all right? So this is in terms of voice-activated payments. The next thing, again, which we are familiar with, is biometric authentication. Again, things that we are exposed to, right? And biometric, typically can be fingerprint, can be iris, can be other forms of, biometric, like there is palm sensors, etc., etc. Biometric authentication is important because it truly reduces fraud, right? Truly reduces fraud. And what it basically does is it ensures that the person doing the transaction is 100% marked as genuine, okay? And we are having use cases today, right? In mobile banking, like for example, every time you open an iPhone, a Face ID is an authentication. You put a thumbprint is an authentication. Because all your banking transactions are now happening from your phone, it is very important that these authentication mechanisms are embedded in the device, right? So which is why these are important. Again, physical access control we are very familiar with, right? Before entering buildings, you have authentication. Aadhaar authentication, Aadhaar-enabled payment systems are based on, like, your Aadhaar OTP. I think a lot of you would be familiar with, right? You use your Aadhaar OTP to authenticate. What happens at the back end, right? There is a ping happening to the main server saying that, hey, is this the person whose Aadhaar I'm verifying, right? And that's it. In one click, you're done, right? So the whole biometric payments and biometric commerce are going to be super important as another innovation. Next is something that we talk in terms of tokenization, right? Tokenization, if you leave the jargon aside, is very simple. You have credit cards, right? For you to use credit cards online, right? Rather than exposing the credit card details to any third-party site, you expose what is called a token. A token is nothing but an encrypted way of storing a sensitive credit card details so that even if there is a breach or a security threat, the card details are not exposed, right? And this is important, right? None of you would want our card details to be exposed, and if it's in a breach, then transactions happen at the back end, etc., etc. This completely removes all that, right? So tokenization is a very important innovation that that is playing out, and this, in some sense, we should give credit to the regulator. The regulator is enforcing a lot of these norms, when it comes to online transactions. So today, if you all use like a Swiggy or a Zomato or anything, then you will find that your card details are already tokenized there. So even if you have saved your card is not exposed to a third party. Okay, and that is super important, right? Because again, like I said, this is important for e-commerce transactions. It's important for wallets because you use your card to load a wallet and so on. Okay, so the next thing is tokenization. And tokenization happens with, also through a concept called NFC, like near field communication. All right. Next, AI. Right? Like how can we have a session and not talk about AI? Right. So AI, especially, has two major implications when it comes to payments. Right. One is in terms of fraud prevention. So fraud prevention in AI is super important because what it does is that it removes all possibilities where there are frauds. It reduces the probability that things can be breached, etc. And how does it do it? It does it by it first detects the fraud. It prevents what is called an account takeover. Account takeover is nothing where like you have an online account and someone is impersonating you online. AI helps avoid that, right? So AI helps avoid account takeovers. Right? And that's important. Obviously, for identity verification is also AI is super critical. All right. Next, AI for personalization. And a lot of you would be familiar with this, right? The thing is, when we use it, we don't realize that it is AI acting at the back. But when you hear about it, you realize, of course, it is. What am I talking about? Let's say you're shopping on Amazon or Flipkart or whatever, right? Let's say after you finish shopping or even as you're shopping, what do you see at the bottom? What do you see? Let me see. Let me see who's answering this. As you're shopping or after you're shopping, what do you see coming at the bottom in terms of nudging you to action? What comes up? Similar products. Brilliant. Right? Similar products. What does similar products mean? Similar products means basically like the algorithm understands what you have shopped in the past, right? It also knows what people like you who have shopped this have also bought, right? And it's suggesting to you, saying, hey, you bought A, do you want to buy B? You bought XYZ, you also want to buy D, etc. That is personalization, right? And you can see it across, right? Let's say even in fashion, right? When you buy 5 things, it shows you the 6th thing that you might want to buy based on your tastes, right? You can see that in Myntra, right? You can see that in a lot of sites, right? That personalization is something that AI brings to the table. Why only shopping? What about your Netflix? What about Amazon Prime Video? You watch certain shows, doesn't it tell you, hey, you watch this show, don't you want to watch the other show? That's nothing but AI-based personalization. Like I said, when you experience it, you don't realize this is playing out in the background, but that is it, right? So that is AI personalization for you. Of course, you can see that playing out also in financial services. Today, for example, a lot of the individual recommendations in terms of portfolios, in terms of what we call as robo-advisory, right? Like if you all use financial apps for investing, for banking, for mutual funds, etc., a lot of the recommendations are AI-based, okay? Because why do we need AI in these cases? Because at the back end, right, you need to mine a lot of data, right? You need to mine a lot of data and come up with something that matches what your characteristics are. And when I say your characteristics, it could be your risk return profile, etc., right? So you need AI for this, okay? So that's the other innovation that's really panning out in the payment space. Next one, and what is something that again, all of us are very familiar with, and this is nothing, something that has not caught your attention, wearables, right? Like your smartwatches, your rings, even lenses, etc., through which you can make payments. Today, the volumes are small, but it's changing, right? It's changing because there are a lot of use cases when it can actually become very easy, for you to be able to make these contactless payments through wearables. Right? Like for example, let's say you're going in a metro, you just want to be able to, let's say, use your smartwatch to tap in and tap out when you're entering the station. That's one use case. Similarly, in a bus, etc., etc. There are n number of use cases where wearables can actually make a big difference, right? And again, at the core, it is NFC. It is tokenization at the heart of it, because again, even for wearables, let's say your card data is saved, right? At the end of the day, payment needs to happen. Like even if you're tapping your phone as you're getting into a metro, there is payment information being exchanged. And it is tokenized so that it's a lot more secure, okay? So fitness facilities, right? Like, and all of us know fitness bands, and those are some of the things that we are very, very familiar with, your Fitbits of the world, etc. They have already have payment capabilities, right? Where you're not only measuring your steps or your workouts, you're also doing commerce through your watches, okay? So we saw a few innovations, right? Like, so right from voice-based authentication to biometric authentication to AI to remove fraud, AI to personalize, to wearables, etc. We saw a few innovations. Now with this, what I'll do, I'm sure I've given a lot of fodder across these slides, right? We will take some questions from folks. There are hand mics which people have, which can be passed around. So please feel free to ask whatever is on your mind. And again, just to put it out right, just feel free to ask what's on your mind. Don't be reserved. What you ask, people will gain from it. So please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Fasil. I'm from IOCode Infotech, a Cali-based company.
Yeah.
So recently, like applications like Paytm and all started charging a little bit like transaction charge for the UPI transaction as well, even though we recharge and everything. Like very little, like 0.15 cents or something. But at that point, an example for to recharge or Jio and all, I started using Jio application. Then there is no transaction fee. So, do you think like UPI will be self-sustainable in the future? So I hear that today government is giving a lot of subsidies. That's the reason that UPI is like able to give like very little transaction fee or none. So when it is sustainable, like self-sustainable, what will be the fee that you are expecting? How it is beneficial or more advantage than a credit card system or a normal transaction system?
Got it. Excellent, excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Very important question pertaining to the ecosystem, right? Will UPI continue to be free? How does it help other stakeholders, manage this? If at all, will there be a cost to it? Will it be priced, etc., etc.? So I was in a conference where NPCI chairman, Dr. Dilip Asbe was speaking, right? And NPCI was, in some sense, the founding fathers of UPI in some sense, right? Like, so people asked him a similar question, right? Because monetization is something playing on people's mind. He said, think of UPI not as a payment mechanism. Think of UPI as infrastructure, right? As a payment infrastructure. So which means, like, what does infrastructure do? Why do we build roads and ports and all that? On infrastructure, you can have commerce on top of it. You can do other things on top of it, right? It's similar with UPI. So when you have UPI, you can build other layers on top of it. What do we mean by that? You can build something called credit on UPI, right? And true to what he said, like, a few months down the line, RBI actually released a paper allowing credit on UPI, right? Like, so, and those are things that one can charge, okay? So it is like, today there is a QR code. The QR code does not have to be paid only with my bank account. Tomorrow you will have a credit line which you will draw from, and credit lines will have interest associated with it. Similarly, there is credit card on UPI, which by the way is already being allowed, right? You can link your credit card to UPI and start using it. You can start using that with RuPay cards. Very soon it will start happening for Visa and MasterCards as well, right? So, for example, insurance, right? Very soon UPI will be a form where insurance will happen, okay? Another use case I'll tell you. Today you have IPOs, which you can subscribe via UPI, right? The brokerage has the liberty to charge a convenience fee to you for that. Today they might not be charging, but they have a liberty to charge because it's a convenience feature that they're allowing you to subscribe to an IPO. Even your mutual fund SIPs, right? Today you can do a UPI auto pay, okay? And so the platform has the wherewithal to charge a convenience fee, right? And that is how it will evolve, right? And I think the way to think, when you start thinking about UPI as infrastructure and you build things on top of it, then what you build on top of it can be charged. Yeah. Yes, I think you had a question. Someone, yes, sure.
Hi, sir. Thomas, and I'm a final year student at IIT Calicut. My question is, most of the physical shops, from malls to even the smallest chai shop, has UPI system. But public transport system, auto rickshaws to local buses, rely on hard cash for their payments. What are the hurdles that are stopping?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, Ben. So, it is changing, right? Like, for example, already a lot of the transport corporations, they are actively exploring the possibility of having QR codes and having UPI-based payments, right? So, they're actively exploring the possibility. There are a lot of discussions happening, not only there, but even, like, for example, the first step happened in petrol pumps, right? If you also, petrol pumps started adopting UPI. Transport corporations are not too far behind. It's the scale which is taking a longer time, because obviously we are talking of a big animal which needs to change its way of working, etc. But it is happening. Okay, if there are no more questions, we will wind up with that. Thank you. Thank you for all for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you.